There's a graveyard of science fiction films buried somewhere between the VHS rental shelves and the cable TV late-night schedule. Films that dared to imagine futures so strange, so unsettling, so genuinely ahead of their time that Hollywood simply didn't know what to do with them. The blockbusters got the posters, the merchandise, and the sequels. These films got the midnight slot and a slow death by obscurity. But here's the thing about great ideas. They don't stay buried. Some of the most imaginative, most daring, most genuinely mind-bending science fiction ever put on screen came out of the 1980s and 90s, and almost nobody saw it. These are the films that predicted your anxieties before you knew you had them. The ones that asked impossible questions and refused to give comfortable answers. How many of these have you actually seen? Because if the answer is less than 5, you've got some serious catching up to do. These are the 15 forgotten gems of 80s and 90s sci-fi. And they're stranger and smarter than you remember. Long before cyberpunk became a recognized genre and long before time travel thrillers started crowding every shelf, a scrappy and inventive little film called Trancers arrived in 1984 and immediately punched so far above its weight class it felt almost unfair. Tim Thomerson steps into the role of Jack Death, arguably the greatest character name in the entire history of science fiction, a hard-boiled law enforcement officer from the future who travels back to 1985 Los Angeles by taking over the body of his own ancestor. His mission is to track down a psychic criminal named Whistler who possesses the terrifying ability to transform ordinary citizens into zombie-like killers with nothing more than a focused stare. The film blends Philip Marlowe-style noir atmosphere with Terminator-style pursuit energy, and somehow comes out as something entirely and bizarrely its own. What burns Trancers into your memory isn't its premise but Thomerson's performance itself, a dry and wonderfully world-weary wit that makes every single scene feel like a collision between a pulp detective novel and a genuinely unsettling fever dream. Helen Hunt, years away from mainstream recognition, plays his reluctant partner with a natural warmth that makes you question why this performance didn't immediately change the course of her career. The future world the film glimpses is corporate, polluted, and quietly frightening in ways that feel uncomfortably familiar. Critics looked past it entirely. Audiences stumbled across it on rental shelves and couldn't stop recommending it to everyone they knew. Trancers is the purest definition of a film that deserved a vastly larger audience than it ever received. John Sayles built The Brother from Another Planet in 1984 on almost no money and somehow produced one of the most quietly shattering science fiction stories ever captured on film. A mute extraterrestrial, brought to life with extraordinary and wordless subtlety by Joe Morton, crashes in Harlem and moves through the city passing as human because his appearance resembles that of a black man, while two relentless bounty hunters track him from across the galaxy. The film never raises its voice about what it's saying. Has no need to. It simply drops this gentle and bewildered alien into the heart of Reagan-era New York and allows the friction of that encounter to do all the work. His ability to repair broken machines through touch becomes a richly layered symbol the story genuinely earns through accumulation rather than declaration. Along the way he moves through a world of addicts, street hustlers, casual racists, and exhausted dreamers, and through his patient and observant silent Sayles constructs one of the most incisive social portraits of that entire decade. This is science fiction operating at its highest purpose, using the genuinely impossible to shine a light on the all-too-possible truth of human experience. The film earned almost nothing at the box office, collected almost no awards recognition, and stands today as one of the most indispensable American films the 1980s ever produced. David Cronenberg unleashed Videodrome on the world in 1983, and the world was entirely unprepared for it. The world still hasn't fully caught up. James Woods plays Max Wren, a morally flexible cable television programmer who intercepts a pirate broadcast that appears to be transmitting actual torture and murder as entertainment. The deeper he investigates, the more his grip on reality loosens. His own body begins behaving in ways that defy biological logic. The television set begins communicating back. Flesh and technology start fusing together in ways that burrow under your skin and remain there for days afterward. Cronenberg described the film as a kind of prophecy, and the accuracy of that description has only grown more striking with each passing year. The film mapped out the internet's most disturbing tendencies, The dissolution of the boundary between screen experience and physical reality, the transformation of media into a weapon, and the way exposure to violence converts itself from entertainment into compulsion into a core part of personal identity. It is nauseating, it is formally brilliant, and it resembles nothing else on this entire list. Critics used the word repulsive and they were describing it accurately. But being repulsive and being essential are two things that can coexist, and Videodrome is absolutely essential for anyone genuinely interested in what science fiction can accomplish when it operates as both body horror and philosophical provocation simultaneously. The flesh remains weak. The signal goes on forever. What would science fiction look like if punk rock had directed it? The answer that question produces is Repo Man, a 1984 film from Alex Cox that is anarchic and hilarious and genuinely strange in ways that still feel fresh. Following a young Los Angeles punk named Otto played by Emilio Estevez who drifts into the profession of automobile repossession and finds himself pursuing a 1964 Chevy Malibu carrying something radioactive and profoundly mysterious in its trunk. The film operates simultaneously as workplace comedy, paranoid conspiracy thriller, alien visitation story, and furious cultural autopsy of Reagan-era consumer America, sometimes cycling through all of those modes within a single unbroken scene. Every food product in the film comes in generic white packaging labeled simply with the word food or the word drink. The professional code the Repo Men live by is both completely absurd and strangely moving. Government operatives are in desperate pursuit of that Malibu before anyone gets curious about what it contains. Beneath all the surface chaos, a genuine anarchist conscience runs through the entire film asking in various registers what any of this civilization is actually worth. Repo Man proved too strange for general audiences and too genuinely intelligent for easy critical dismissal. It built its following slowly through late-night television and college campus screenings and has lived in that devoted community ever since. It remains a perfect film about flawed and searching people in pursuit of something no one can adequately explain. Tobe Hooper sat in the director's chair for Life Force in 1985, a film in which a joint British and American space mission returns from Halley's Comet carrying 3 humanoid extraterrestrial passengers. One of them presents as a beautiful woman and reveals herself almost immediately to be an energy-consuming predator. The others are not far behind. London tips rapidly into apocalyptic disintegration as a spreading plague of soul-draining creatures tears through the population, and the military attempts to contain something that operates entirely outside any framework it possesses for understanding. Life Force is operating at a pitch of total and committed operatic madness that by any rational calculation should collapse under its own weight, and instead holds together with a strange and almost perverse structural confidence. The ambition far exceeds what a production of its classification should have been capable of sustaining. The underlying ideas carry a genuine and deeply unsettling quality, blending the tradition of British science fiction dread with American genre excess and arriving at a cosmically nihilistic conclusion that still delivers its impact like a physical blow. Failed completely at the box office. Critical reception ranged from dismissive to openly mocking. But the reach of what Life Force was attempting was substantial and strange enough that people have never stopped returning to it and writing about it decades later. If your criteria for a science fiction film is total and absolute commitment to its own particular brand of insanity, nothing on this list competes. Not every overlooked film from this era needs to carry philosophical weight on its shoulders. Sometimes a film simply needs to be an honest and inventive good time that the market buried through bad timing and bad luck. And my science project from 1985 is precisely that kind of rediscovery waiting to happen. A high school student stumbles across a mysterious piece of technology in a government salvage yard that turns out to be alien in origin and capable of tearing holes in the fabric of time and space. What pours through those holes includes dinosaurs, Roman soldiers, motorcycle riding mutants from an unspecified future, and a school building that gradually transforms into a convergence point for every era of human history arriving simultaneously. The film captures something genuinely characteristic of the best 80s genre entertainment, a kind of unself-conscious imaginative generosity that bigger productions often traded away in pursuit of polish. The performances are warm and easy, the effects work creatively within clear financial limitations, and the whole production moves with an infectious momentum that more expensive films of the same period frequently failed to generate. Caught between the commercial dominance of Back to the Future and weird science during the summer of 1985, my science project never found the audience it needed in its moment. That moment is still available to anyone willing to look. There is simply no other film that occupies the same space as The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, released in 1984. Nothing preceded it in that space. Nothing has followed it there. The universe appears to have produced exactly one of these. The title character is simultaneously a particle physicist, a neurosurgeon, a racing driver, a rock musician, and the commanding officer of a team of unconventional adventurers who uncovers the fact that the eighth dimension is currently occupied by hostile alien beings who have been hiding inside Italian immigrants, and that he alone is positioned to prevent the consequences. Peter Weller brings such composed and unflappable conviction to the central performance that the entire impossible edifice somehow maintains structural integrity. Jeff Goldblum appears in the film wearing full cowboy attire, and the film never addresses this directly. John Lithgow delivers the villain at a register of theatrical intensity that genuinely requires direct viewing to understand. The film proceeds at its own pace and on its own terms and demonstrates zero interest in pausing to bring anyone up to speed. Critical response was confusion. Audience response was bewilderment. A sequel was announced and never materialized. The people who connected with Buckaroo Banzai connected with a ferocity and a protectiveness that has sustained the film's reputation across 4 decades without any institutional support. It is not merely a film. It is a declaration of philosophy. Strangeness is not a flaw to be corrected. It is the point. This one operates differently from the others on this list. This one settles into your memory and stays. In Miracle Mile from 1988, a warm and unremarkable man named Harry, played by Anthony Edwards, meets the person he believes he has been waiting for his entire life at the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. They agree to meet again later that evening. Harry picks up a payphone by chance, and the voice on the other end is a stranger telling him that nuclear warheads are already airborne and that the city has approximately 50 minutes remaining. What the film builds from that moment forward represents some of the most authentically terrifying science fiction the decade produced. And its terror has nothing to do with creatures or extraterrestrials or advanced technology, but everything to do with the precise and devastating accuracy of its portrait of how ordinary human beings actually behave when civilizational collapse becomes unavoidable. The information spreads through the city in waves. Harry moves through the gathering chaos in search of the woman he just met. The emotional weight of the final act surpasses almost anything the 1980s managed to put on screen in this genre. Director Steve Diernaut built this film from a minimal budget and captured it with a documentary urgency that makes the disintegration feel immediate and physically present. It works as a love story and as an end-of-the-world scenario, and as a serious meditation on whether hope retains any rational justification when hope is the only resource left available. Miracle Mile is a genuine masterpiece that passed through theaters in near total silence. Richard Stanley's first feature film, Hardware from 1990, arrives as a post-apocalyptic vision soaked in industrial imagery, genuine menace, and a visual imagination that marks Stanley immediately as someone operating at a different level from his contemporaries. The world the film inhabits is already past saving. A soldier acquires what appear to be the scattered components of a decommissioned military robot and brings them back as a gift for the woman he loves. The components reassemble themselves. The machine, a combat unit designated Mark 13 and designed with a single operational purpose, begins methodically hunting every living thing within the confined space of the apartment. The claustrophobia is total. The violence is visceral. The beauty is genuine and strange in the way that only filmmaking produced from complete personal conviction can be. Stanley packed every frame with visual and cultural references that reward repeated viewing, building an image of a civilization so thoroughly exhausted that it has lost the ability to imagine its own continuation. The score hits with relentless force. The images don't leave. The core proposition of the film, that the technology you design to keep you safe will eventually direct itself toward your destruction, carries exactly the same weight now that it carried when the film was first dismissed as exploitation product. It was also running decades ahead of every subsequent entry in the killer technology thriller category. Fortress arrived in 1992 carrying Christopher Lambert, an underground prison facility operating at the far extreme of dystopian fiction, and a foundational premise so uncompromisingly bleak that it makes most of what the genre had previously attempted look almost cheerful by comparison. The world the film constructs has criminalized reproduction beyond a single child, and Lambert, along with his pregnant partner, is apprehended and transferred to a subterranean correctional institution administered by a corporate artificial intelligence system that maintains continuous surveillance of every prisoner's cognitive activity and responds to infractions through a device surgically embedded in every inmate's abdomen. The film commits to the full horror of this architecture without flinching and without softening. Lambert does not typically generate praise for the nuance of his performances, but the particular quality of confused endurance he brings here serves the material with unexpected precision, communicating a man fighting to preserve something recognizably human inside a system engineered specifically to eliminate that possibility. Fortress is a genre film that believes in itself without reservation, and that belief carries it cleanly past every budgetary constraint it encounters into something that genuinely lingers. The questions it raises about institutional surveillance, state control over reproductive decisions, and corporate ownership of human biological existence feel substantially less like science fiction speculation today than they did at the time of release. The London of Split Second, set in 2008 and released in 1992, is a city drowning under risen floodwaters with a serial predator operating somewhere inside it. The predator turns out to be something operating well outside the boundaries of the human. Rutger Hauer plays Harley Stone, a detective running entirely on caffeine, chocolate, and a personal obsession with this case that has been consuming him for years and visibly consuming his mental stability along with it. Split Second understands precisely what kind of film it is and pursues that identity with complete and unembarrassed dedication, giving Hauer full permission to operate at his most energetically unhinged alongside Kim Cattrall and a partner character whose arc runs from methodical academic rationalism to desperate screaming demands for significantly larger weaponry. The practical creature work holds up with genuine effectiveness. The visual atmosphere, built from rain-drenched industrial corridors and the flicker of neon through standing water, creates a mood that actually works. Hauer commits to every moment with an enthusiasm that makes the whole enterprise feel like exactly the right amount of fun. Split Second is a film with a precise and honest self-assessment, a creature thriller moving at pace with a lead performer who understands the assignment and a dry wit operating just below the surface that keeps elevating it beyond its category. It has received a fraction of the recognition it earned.